Every time you tow a trailer home or come back from a long highway drive on a hot summer day and then just shut the engine off and walk away, you're doing something that's slowly destroying your turbochargers. And the worst part? You didn't invent this habit. It's a completely natural reflex because nobody ever explained to you why it's dangerous. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what happens inside a turbocharger in those seconds right after you turn the key, why the F-150 EcoBoost has a specific reason to be more vulnerable to this than some other Ford turbo engines, and I'll show you a real-world example of an owner whose turbochargers were literally caked with baked-on oil and coolant because of this one habit. By the end, you'll have an exact, simple protocol you can start using the very next time you get in the truck. How a turbocharger actually dies. To understand this mistake, you first need to understand one thing about turbochargers that most people never think about. A turbocharger spins at over 100,000 revolutions per minute, and the center section, the center housing, where the shaft and bearings live, operates at temperatures that can exceed 1,300, sometimes even 1,450 degrees Fahrenheit on the exhaust side. That part is, quite literally, glowing hot. While the engine is running, two things keep that temperature under control. First, oil flows through the center housing to lubricate the bearings, and along the way it also carries away heat. Second, coolant circulates around that same housing for additional cooling. Now here's the critical moment, the instant you turn the key and shut the engine off. At that exact moment, the oil pump stops, immediately. There's no more flow of fresh, cool oil through the bearings. But the heat that's built up in the turbocharger's metal doesn't disappear right away. It keeps expanding, essentially cooking, and that heat now goes straight into the small amount of oil trapped around the bearings at the moment of shutdown. That trapped oil, exposed to extreme temperature with no circulation to carry the heat away, starts to break down. The lighter components evaporate, and what's left turns into a hard, sticky residue similar to soot or tar. Mechanics call this oil coking. That deposit literally bakes itself onto the bearing walls. The first time this happens, you probably won't notice anything, but every time you repeat this cycle, towing, a hot drive, shutting off immediately, you add a little more of that residue. Over time, it narrows the passages oil needs to flow freely through, reduces lubrication flow to the bearing, and eventually causes the turbine shaft to start rubbing directly against the housing metal instead of floating on a film of oil. That's the point where the turbocharger starts whistling, losing boost pressure, and eventually failing completely. Why the F-150 EcoBoost is especially vulnerable. Now we get to the part most F-150 EcoBoost owners have no idea about, and I think you should, because it changes how you should treat your engine. Some Ford EcoBoost engines have a built-in active defense against exactly this problem. The smaller EcoBoost engines, the 1.0 litre from the Focus and Fiesta and the 1.5 litre from the Escape, have a dedicated electric coolant pump that automatically kicks in after the engine shuts off if a sensor detects high temperature, and keeps circulating cool coolant around the turbochargers until they've cooled to a safe level. That's a real active protection system. But here's the key piece of information. The V6 EcoBoost engines in the F-150, both the 2.7 and the 3.5 litre, both generations, do not have that electric pump. Instead, they use what Ford's engineers call a passive thermosiphon effect. When the engine shuts off and the coolant pump stops running, physics itself takes over. Heated coolant around the turbochargers becomes lighter and naturally rises and moves, pulling cooler coolant in behind it, purely based on the density difference at different temperatures, with no moving pump pushing it along. This system works. Ford tested it and built it into the EcoBoost design from the very beginning, specifically to address this issue. But the key difference is, this is a passive, slower form of protection, not an active one. It relies on small differences in fluid density rather than pump pressure. That means it's less effective in extreme situations. For example, when the engine has been under heavy load on a hot day for an extended period. Exactly the situations where the turbocharger's center housing is hottest and where an active pump would matter the most. In other words, your F-150 V6 EcoBoost has less built-in factory defense against this problem than some of the smaller engines in the same EcoBoost family. That doesn't mean it's poorly engineered. The thermosiphon effect is more than sufficient for the vast majority of situations. But it does mean your habit, your personal shutdown routine, matters significantly more for you than it does for, say, a Ford Escape owner running the 1.5 EcoBoost. Real-world proof. This isn't theory. Owners and mechanics who have physically torn down failed turbochargers on EcoBoost engines confirm exactly this scenario. One owner of a 2011 F-150 with a 3.5 EcoBoost, who had to replace both turbochargers after a few years, described the internal condition as literally caked with oil and coolant, entirely consistent with the coking mechanism we just walked through. Reports like this have been showing up in owner communities for over a decade now, and they almost always follow the same pattern. The owner admits to towing a trailer or driving aggressively on the highway, then shutting the engine off immediately upon arriving home, without a single moment to let things settle. That's not a coincidence. It's a direct consequence of the physics we just covered. Passive cooling simply didn't have time to carry away all that built-up heat before the oil in the bearing had already started breaking down. How to tell if you've been doing this. Before we get to the fix, here's how to check whether your turbocharger might already be showing early signs of this problem. The first sign is a whistling or hissing sound under full throttle that you haven't heard before, a sign that air or oil is leaking past worn seals on the turbine shaft. The second sign is a slightly slower throttle response, especially at low RPM, that feeling of the engine thinking about it half a second longer than it used to. The third, more serious sign is bluish smoke from the exhaust under acceleration, meaning oil is already passing through damaged turbine seals and burning along with the fuel. And the fourth, most serious sign, a metallic grinding sound coming from the turbocharger area, meaning the shaft is already making physical contact with the housing due to lack of lubrication. If you hear this, stop driving and get the vehicle to a diagnostic shop immediately, because continuing to drive in this condition can destroy the turbocharger entirely, and in the worst case, send metal debris into the engine. If you recognize either of the first two symptoms, the good news is you still have time to change the habit and slow further deterioration. The exact fix, step by step. Here's exactly what to do, and just as important, when you don't need to worry about this at all. When special attention isn't needed. If you are driving calmly around town without a heavy load in moderate temperatures, just shut the engine off as usual. The turbocharger never reached an extreme temperature in that scenario, and passive cooling is more than enough. When attention is needed, 3 specific situations. Situation 1. You towed a trailer or a load for any distance beyond a few miles. Situation 2. You drove for an extended period on the highway at higher speed, especially uphill or against a strong headwind, where the engine runs under sustained load. Situation 3. Outside temperature was high, above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, combined with either of the first 2 situations. If you're in any of these 3 situations, here's the protocol recommended by experienced turbo engine mechanics. Step 1. In the last mile or 2 before you reach your destination, consciously ease off the load. If you're on the highway, back off the speed a bit. If you're climbing a grade, try to do that earlier in the drive, not in the final few minutes. This naturally starts bringing the turbocharger's temperature down while you're still driving, which is when cooling is most effective. Step 2. Once you've parked, don't turn the key off right away. Let the engine idle for roughly 30 to 60 seconds. If you are towing a heavy load for an extended period on a hot day, extend that to 1 or 2 minutes. During this period, the oil pump and the coolant pump are both still running normally, actively carrying heat away from the turbocharger's center housing until the temperature drops to a safer level. Step 3. Only then shut the engine off. At that point, the temperature in the center housing is already significantly lower. The oil left trapped around the bearing is cooler, and the passive thermosiphon effect has a much easier job finishing the cooling process. That's it. No extra equipment needed, no need to buy one of those so-called turbo timers people used to install on older turbo cars. Just 30 to 60 seconds of your attention, and only after drives that genuinely put the engine under load. A related mistake that makes it worse. There's one additional factor that directly amplifies the risk of coking, and I made a whole separate video about it. The condition of the oil in your engine at the moment this happens. Remember that direct injection EcoBoost engines tend to dilute their own oil with fuel, especially on shorter, colder drives. Diluted oil is thinner, has a lower boiling point, and is considerably more prone to rapid breakdown when exposed to extreme temperature without circulation. exactly the situation we just described. That means if you regularly tow heavy loads, while also pushing oil changes out to the factory 10,000 mile interval instead of changing it every 5,000, you're stacking two risk factors on top of each other. Oil that's already chemically weakened, exposed to precisely the kind of thermal shock that damages weakened oil the most. That combination destroys turbochargers faster than either factor on its own. The good news is the fix for both problems goes hand in hand. A shorter oil change interval and 30 seconds of patience before shutting off the engine after a hard drive, together dramatically cut that risk. If this video opened your eyes, drop a like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments whether you already knew about this passive cooling issue or whether this was news to you too.